everybody. Welcome back to another episode here at the Raspy Dispatcher. As we're recording this show, it is actually the day before my birthday. And how does 32 years really just fly by like that? So, I'm feeling a little sentimental. and, as I'm starting to talk with more people and really reflect on my journey in dispatch, my journey in life, I just wanted to take a moment to express my gratitude for everybody who's helped me along the way in every step of my journey, from basketball coaches to family to friends to mentors and professionals in this field. They've really, especially anyone who's listened to me go on about my idea of the recipe dispatcher, 3 in the morning while taking 911 calls. I truly appreciate this, and I wouldn't be here today without each and every one of you. So I am so thankful for that. If you are new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button for our YouTube channel, The Recipe Dispatcher, so you don't miss out on any up and coming videos, as well as follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, all that good stuff. So to wrap all that up, today we are talking to Cassie from First Responder Wellness. She's a former dispatcher, pretty fresh out the game. So she's going to come on, talk about her experience and the awesome company that she's working with that's helping dispatchers and first responders in general. Hello, Cassie. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Ashley, and also happy birthday. So great.
Thank you. Yeah, it's weird. Time is weird. It's flying so fast, and I feel younger every day.
Well, and it goes by faster. Someone told me that the older you get, the faster it goes by, and it does. And even the last few years, it's gone by faster and faster. And I'm like, okay, it's very scary.
It really is. I'm like, we slow that a little bit.
Yeah.
So again, thank you so much for coming out today. We just wanted to kind of tell everybody a little bit about yourself, your story. We'd love to hear about it.
Yeah. So I just wrapped up a 14-year career in law enforcement. I was going to say dispatch, but there's so much more to that. I found my way into law enforcement when I was 19, like fresh out of high school and college. I was a dance teacher before that, was going to college to be a teacher. And I realized really quick that that wasn't for me. I was already burned out at 19. I'm like, how does that happen? So what now? But I had I had two friends who were already in law enforcement, and they were young also, but it seemed so exciting. And they were always talking about like their day-to-day life. And every day I'd be like, tell me more, tell me more, tell me more. And I think they would get tired. One in particular, I think, got tired of me asking all the time, like, would you just apply already? And so I was kind of like, what do you mean apply? Like, I know nothing about this. And I don't even think I even dreamed of doing anything like this. I didn't even know this was an option for me. And next thing you know, I applied to 2 cities really close to each other. One picked me up faster. I went out into the field and started working in the traffic division, parking enforcement, Beach City. Living the dream, as I would call it. Like, really, I was.
Yeah.
Especially during the summer, it was so beautiful and amazing. And here I am, 19 years old, smiling, handing people parking tickets. And it really came off sarcastic, but really I was just a really bubbly, happy girl who was just like, I'm just living my best life. Really quick after that, I got asked, I started that fork in the road where I was still living at home. Parents were kind of like, hey, you need to either go to school or have a full-time job. So I was kind of trying to decide what next. I took a dispatch course.
Oh, really?
I thought like, hey, this is going to better me. I'm going to be a cop. I'm not going to be a dispatcher, but this will make me a better cop, which it would have. I learned everything I needed to know to be a cop. One of my teachers in Dispatch Academy actually prepped me for my oral boards to work in the jail.
Oh, wow.
So, I was in Dispatch Academy to not be there for dispatch, which is so ironic. But here I am, 14 years later. The mentors in that class, I still I now teach with, which is so
That's
amazing.
awesome.
Like I've stayed in touch with all those people. And so who would have thought that my career would have shifted the way it did? So I went to traffic, went into the jail, became a jail officer for a couple of years, and then ultimately became a dispatcher. And I moved around departments. And I learned recently by some friends, some police officer friends, they called it transient policing. And then I kind of laughed because it's the, benefits are not what they used to be. And so now it's more of a we're hopping around departments. And I did that. I hopped around for opportunity and what I thought would make me happy, moved around. I thought I was going to be the deputy chief at my department, civilian deputy chief. And that didn't work out because my path took me a different way. And that kind of leads me into my story. When they hire you and put your application in, we go through this really rigorous process and background packet and everything. And we do go through a psych and everything, but you don't realize like how your childhood and your life molds you to become a dispatcher or a police officer or a firefighter. And, add in some childhood trauma, some sexual abuse, and some learning some really poor coping skills in your life, and you're cut out to be a dispatcher.
Yeah.
And so I had a childhood where I grew up in a family that, unfortunately we didn't express emotions in a healthy way. And we were taught to push everything under the rug. And so what I learned was that actually made me a really great dispatcher. And while that wasn't healthy, that helped me survive. That was the best way I knew how to survive. I got into law enforcement, and that's what law enforcement did, right? Like, show must go on. Let's push everything under the rug. Keep the show going.
Next call.
Next call. The culture is slowly shifting, but when I got in 14 years ago, that was not the culture. We were the push everything under. You got to keep going. So I did really great until I didn't. And so I kept on taking on projects, administrative projects. I was working at 3 different agencies at some point, dispatch, because in dispatch you can do that. Like, you can work part-time at other agencies and moonlight and do all these different things. And I was working on CAD projects, and I was a trainer, and I was a supervisor at some point for a brief period of time. And I was doing anything and everything. I wanted to be the superstar. And I worked my ass off. Worked hard, but some people's coping skills are alcohol, and some people's are sex, and some are Amazon packages, and some are buying the next house or boat or whatever, and mine was overtime and work. It became 10 sleeping pills because I couldn't sleep after night shift, and then isolation. My coping skills looked different as time went on, but I isolated, would take 10 Costco sleeping pills, and I would work all the time. And eventually that didn't serve me anymore, and I couldn't do it. And by year 10, I lost a captain and a friend of mine to a murder-suicide in a really horrific situation. A few months later, lost another officer in a horrific car crash. And that was the straw on the camel's back for me. And I was like, all right, time to go talk to someone. And I don't know if you're a Brene Brown fan, or I'm sure there's plenty of people listening that are, but she talks about her experience going to therapy. And she says that she went in, and she's a therapist, but also a researcher and storyteller and shame researcher. And she talks about how she goes to therapy, and she tells the therapist how therapy is going to go. I'm here to do therapy, but I'm only going to talk about this, and then I'm going to get fixed, and I'm going to go back to work, and that's it. And that's basically what I did. I went to therapy, told my therapist, I'm here to talk about my work shit, and that's it. I don't want to talk about my family life. I don't want to talk about my childhood trauma. I don't want to talk about anything. I'm only here to talk about work. You're going to fix me, and then I'm better. My therapist just looked at me and was like, okay, we'll see how that goes. And as she started pulling the little strings on the rug, it unraveled very quickly. And then that was about fall of I want to say 2018, and things really quickly, it was bad. And I lost my life very quickly. And it got worse and worse and worse. And then I slowly, that next year, things unraveled more and more and more. And then I was on leave from work for 10 months. And 5 months into that, I would try to commit suicide. And I'm so grateful, and I can't say this enough, that I was not able to complete it. Because one, I wouldn't be able to be here today. I wouldn't be able to help other first responders. And I did ask for help, and I did go to treatment. I went to a Gen Pop program, as I call it, because as first responders, right, like that's how we relate.
Yeah.
But when I did ask for help, I was given the EAP, which in most cases are not conducive for first responders. They're for everyone, for Gen Pop programs. So I did what I could, and I got help, and it worked for me. Afterwards, this is how I found out about first responder wellness. So this is where everything starts to tie in. I went to some support groups, and it's called the First Responder Fellowship. And I started going to these peer-run fellowship groups where first responders can go and just share what's on their mind. More trauma-based, PTS, that kind of thing. We just go and share for a few minutes. It's a safe place, other first responders, and it's first responder only. And they're all over California, some in person, some on Zoom. We have one like every night of the week now, pretty much. Awesome. And it's a really amazing space, and it's grown, and we give the format away for free. It doesn't cost anything. People can start them anywhere they want. But I found this support group, and I still go. This was 3 years ago. And at the time, the in-person one was held at First Responder Wellness. And I was like, where was this? Right? Like, I could have saved a lot of heartache just coming to this program. Yeah. So I watched, but I was skeptical at first, because as first responders we are, and I was kind of like, is this program really doing what they say they are doing? Like, what do you mean you're a first responder program? Like, does that even exist? So I sat back and watched for a while. Yeah. And then as months went on, and I watched the people going through the program, and I saw the healing and the magic that was happening. I was like, holy shit. Like, this place, there's something about this place. Yeah. And there really is something about this place. And then I decided I need to work here. So my healing journey, I'll come back to that. My healing journey, there was a lot of components to it. I did inpatient treatment. I did outpatient treatment. I went to retreats. I went to support groups, and I still do therapy. And I still do keep up on my recovery every single day, because it's important to me. I don't ever want to get back to that place. I retired a few months ago, and I know that was something that we wanted to talk about, that what it looks like after dispatch, that there is life after dispatch, that for those that are retiring, whether you're 5 years in, 10 years in, 15 years, or you've worked a whole 30-year career, because now you have to work 30 to 40 years because of the retirement system. But like, your life doesn't end just because you retired. Like, there's so much out there for you to do, whether you go work at a coffee shop or Disneyland, or there's so many different options there, but there's amazing things out there. My transition out was harder than I thought it was going to be. I already was working. I was doing this. I've been working here a year. I started literally this week a year ago. Oh, wow. Which is so amazing. So I had already tiptoed in thinking that like, oh, I'm totally 100% ready to give it up. And then it was a lot harder to give up the headset and the badge than I thought it was. And there's something about walking out of the brotherhood that you don't realize when you step out of the uniform and you walk away, that that means something. You still have your friends, some of them, but like out of sight, out of mind. Like, unfortunately, there's something about that. Like, I learned that when I lateral agencies.
Out, that fear of missing out. Yeah, for sure.
Like, and especially with social media now, you see all the pictures and the things going on, and you're kind of like, oh, I'm not there. It's just, I kind of realized that too. This is the first year in 10 plus years that I'm not working 4th of July. 4th of July, which I know is like, I was
No,
kind
it's
of
so
like,
true. It's
I'm
like,
like,
yeah,
now what? Like, and
yeah.
one of the girls texted me and said, well, what are you going to do with yourself? And I'm like,
I'm
I
gonna
wish
call
I knew.
911. I'm gonna call
Yeah.
911 and tell them I hear people
Shots
shooting in the
fired.
area,
Yeah.
and I know what they sound like because
Yeah.
I worked in
Exactly.
law enforcement. That's what I'm gonna
Right.
do.
I know. I'm going to harass you guys. What do you
Oh,
mean? Like,
yeah,
I
what do
mean,
you mean?
4th of July was like, it's a mandated holiday for us. We're beach cities over
Mhm.
here. And like,
Oh
it
yeah.
was honestly, I know it was mandated and a lot of people hated working it, but it was one of my favorite days to work. I got to see a lot of my friends from other agencies, and I always got to do like something special because I got to go rally all the radios from everyone at the end of the night, which seems so silly, but I loved doing that. And
Yeah.
it gave me something to do, but like, and we got catered food, so it was always like really delicious.
I'm always for the food. Yep.
Yeah, me
Mhm.
too. So it's like silly stuff that like you don't think about. Like now I'm like, well, what do I do now? I haven't ever had a 4th of July in 10 years. So it's like I gotta find
Mhm.
things to do. So silly transitions, but like things you don't think about.
Yeah. No, for sure. Well, first, thank you so much for like. I know I'm not the first show podcast thing you came on to share your story, so thank you for being willing to be so vulnerable. I mean, it's tough, just bearing our souls to folks. So I just wanted to thank you specifically for being willing to do so, because you have helped so many people, and you're going to continue to help people. So I do appreciate that, and I just wanted to touch on a few things. Was first foremost getting in the game at 19 years old. Like, I know 19-year-old Ashley, and I couldn't imagine 19-year-old Ashley answering, 911 calls and like just being this pillar for folks who are going through crisis for 12-hour periods, 4 to 5 days a week, um, 365 days a year. Though I am a big advocate for people getting into this career early so they can get out earlier and be financially set, um, instead of having and going to school while doing the job. Like, I think it's a great option for all those things. But how do you think, looking back, being 19 years old, starting, that had a really huge effect on how you grew in this job? Because I think I started I'm trying to do math, when I was 27, 28. So I had life under me, coming into this role. How do you think that kind of differs starting at 19 in this line of work?
I think there's pros and cons to both, right? Like I hear a lot
Mhm.
of agencies now. I jokingly have said recently, like in the last year or two, that I don't think my agencies would have hired me now with
Mhm.
the way that they hire now. I don't think they would have hired me at 19 because they
Mhm.
look for life experience, right? Like I hear that so often now. They want people with life experience. Well, at
Mhm.
19, I didn't have any life experience. I was just
Yeah.
a kid. But there's benefits, right? They can mold you
Mhm.
as a new dispatcher, and back then I was not hired in as a dispatcher. I was jail and traffic and everything. I was basically a cadet, so to speak, at the first part.
Mhm.
But you mold in, whereas like if you come in with life experience, you're going to come in with bad habits, I guess. Like that's how I would say it. Or like a lateral dispatcher, that's what we would call it, where you
Mhm.
already have habits.
Yeah.
So there's pros and cons. I The benefit of coming in at 19, I bought a condo and house and stuff at a very young age and a single income. The
Mhm.
cons are I'm 33 years old and not married and don't have a family.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
like because I worked 3 jobs and like dedicated my life to my career. Now I
Mhm.
mean all my other dispatch friends have families and lives. So I mean it's really an individual thing, but like I really dedicated my 20s to only caring about my career.
Mhm.
So I think it really is individualistic in that sense.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, I also, that was my coping skill, right? As I said, so like mine was workaholic. I was coping with life. So I
Mhm.
threw myself into work and that's all I cared about. I missed out on so much.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that because I started at 19, like I watched so many of my friends and family get married and have kids and everything that I was like, I'm not ready for that. I love, dream, breathe law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
I to the point where I was watching all those reality shows. I've said that
Yeah.
before to so many people. Like I could not get enough. Like, and I did have friends, like we would spend like early in my 20s, we would spend every Wednesday night together with like a social group.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd go on trips and stuff, but like, and I travel a lot. Like back then, like I have a best friend and we would travel together, but like, yeah, I mean, I spent so much of my 20s working, and
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say it's a regret. I have shifted that now.
Mm-hmm.
Now I have a much different work-life balance.
Definitely. No, I definitely get that. And I think one thing that's super important for like a lot of people who tune in with me um, are not only in dispatch, but they're considering dispatch and they're trying to see if it's a good fit. And you brought up triggers and like our life experience definitely impacts um, how we take these calls and how we consume these calls. And you kind of never know what someone else's trigger is, or even what your own trigger is going to be. Like I know a lot of my um, coworkers in the past have been like, yeah, I was fine with calls that I had kids until I had kids. You know what I mean? So um, it is very true that our lives, um, I mean, we all have trauma. We all have some kind of baggage, something that affects how we make decisions and how we go about protecting ourselves from things happening again, or preventing things from harming us. Doesn't mean that we can't do this job, but we need to be aware of that and honest with ourselves about that. Um, and really, and not try to fight it, not try to be like, I have this trigger, but I'm gonna overcome that. And if it's your trigger and your trigger, and that's okay. But having a really good understanding of that when you're deciding to get into this job, I think is super important and will save maybe some additional trauma that could have been avoided.
And there's something to that, right? Like everyone, you're right. Everyone has trauma and everyone has triggers. I think that those who work on it and are aware of it, there brings a special empathy and compassion to that
Mhm.
component to that job. And those people who come into our world and can answer those calls and have that compassion, those are
Mhm.
the best dispatchers, I think, because
Definitely.
everyone's talked to those dispatchers, right? Who are the harsh, cold ones where you're like,
Yeah.
damn, man, like I'm just trying to call for help. And I've
Yeah.
had those partners where I'm sitting in the room and I'm like, I don't even know what they said on the other line, but why are you answering like that? And then
Yeah.
I've had the ones where I'm like, whew, I can feel like the heartfeltness just over here and it's making me have all the feels. And it doesn't have to be like that either. Like
Yeah.
there can be a happy medium. Like you don't have to answer
Mhm.
every call and it doesn't have to be a counseling session, but like making a difference, like I don't know, I assume that most of us come into this career to make a difference, right?
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
at least I did, but also there's a breaking point for most of us. For me, there was when I came back after my suicide attempt. I was sitting there going, am I taking every suicide call for real?
Yeah. Yeah,
And
I can
that was
imagine.
really hard.
Yeah.
And there was a point where I was like, oh, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And then I got through that. Like
Mhm.
it wasn't every suicide call, it was a specific type, the ones that were doing it the way that I was trying to do it. And
Mhm.
then I got through that. And yeah, I mean, I most of my friends that have kids, it's the kid calls, and then like there's it is certain triggers for certain people and it just makes a difference. But
Mhm.
there's a certain like when I came back from treatment, I'll tell you what, I have a huge different compassion for people with addiction,
Mhm.
whereas I did not have that before.
Yeah.
So I think that having those makes us human. Whereas if you
Mhm.
just come in and you're a robot, I don't think those people are the right people either.
Yeah. No, 1,000%. And I remember my academy was actually really, they did a really good job at bringing in like the peer support for our department and creating space to be like, yeah, people in this line of work, first responders, they do go to alcohol, they do turn to drugs. They do find different ways to cope with this trauma and they did speak about as a culture historically, uh, the movement hasn't been like it's okay not to be okay. It's been sweep under the rug, as you mentioned, in the past. Like, I'm a Superman, Superwoman. I can do anything. And now we're really shifting to a time in this career where we're doing peer support. We're creating spaces to gather and really connect and talk about the experience they've had because it's so unique to this line of work. I go to a party, people ask me like, "Oh, how was work?" And it's like, do you really want to? Like,
I know.
So,
or they ask like, "What's the worst call you've ever had?" And I'm like, I don't think we want to talk about that.
That can get awkward real quick, So,
yeah.
We're definitely, I think, in a place where we're really pushing as departments, which is kind of where the backbone needs to come for some people, to seek that help, to seek those services, to understand our triggers, to confide in each other, our coworkers, our workplace about our triggers and how we're feeling about calls in order to be okay.
And support each other is huge.
And support each other. Yeah. No, 1,000%. And I know that sitting in that academy, listening to those folks talk about those things being new, I wondered like, oh, like what is it gonna be for me? You know what I mean? Because I I don't have any really identified triggers that I've noticed yet with calls. Um, I do have calls that rub me the wrong way, but I haven't found that one thing right when I hear it that I just, my stomach drops yet. And my thought when they were talking about it was, how do I create a system or space or roadmap to navigate prior to that big call happening? How can I create a system to help protect myself where I don't hit an overwhelmed part from having all that trauma being fed to me for X amount of time?
I think that looks different for everyone. And like
Mhm.
for me, it was that I let my backpack get too full, right?
Mm.
As I would call it. Because in the beginning, what triggered me wasn't the same things that triggered me in the end.
Mm.
Like before, suicide calls didn't bother me. It wasn't until I had people in my life that were completing suicide, or it wasn't a personal thing in the beginning, and then it was a personal thing. And then car crashes weren't a personal thing, and then suddenly it was. Like it was, events started piling up and I wasn't offloading the rocks.
Mm.
And so I think something that became an issue for me and that now I've learned to do, because it's the job I had equated this recently. My job now, it looks different in some ways, but isn't. I still have to process trauma and process incidents and offload trauma. I have to take rocks out of the backpack.
Mm.
Otherwise, the rocks in the backpack still get heavy.
Mm.
And so doing self-care, going to support groups, and doing my recovery every day is still important to me. So just like with dispatch, I encourage dispatchers, whether at teaching academy, teaching crisis intervention, supervisor courses, CTO, whatever class, anytime I'm in front of someone, it's like, I make sure like something that meditation's important to me too. That helps keep me even keel. But offloading some of the rocks out of the backpack so the backpack doesn't get too heavy, I think that's where the trauma for me starts to affect me, is that I realize that those triggers, while like on a normal day, that trigger might not be so explosive. But if the backpack's starting to get too heavy, that trigger now is like a volcano, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense. Totally. It's even if you think of it as a minimum and you're just like, I'm just having a rough day, just in general, like a call that wouldn't annoy you is going to annoy you a little quicker, right? So
totally,
we definitely just have to be cautious and be aware, like it's okay to have a rough day, but I think one thing, especially in dispatch, with our shortages and things like that, there can be a little bit of guilt having to use our time that we've earned. Um, and I think we need to get away from that as well. If you are sick, if need that time for your mental health and your space, take it. For me personally, my thought is, we accumulate this time off, this vacation, this PTO, whatever it looks like at your department, to use it. And unfortunately, sometimes in our centers, we're short staffed, and that may cause someone to be forced in and things of that nature. But I'm never, me personally, and I know this isn't everyone, I'm never going to be upset of being forced to stay because my coworker's sick or my, like life has happened. And of course, that's not accounting for people who misuse the system. But I want people to really use their time and take the time to take a day to unload the rocks, like whatever that looks like for you. Because I would rather my partners, my coworkers, be feel strong and feel healthy and feel prepared to come take on more trauma, because that's what we're doing. Even if we don't notice that it's slowly starting to fill our backpacks, like it is, whether we acknowledge it or not. So really, I'm really an advocate for using our time and taking those spaces to really provide that self-care to ourselves.
Well, in 100%, I agree. And same when I was there, because also if they're coming in and they're not on their best, or they're struggling, or they're adding more rocks and they're already full, that becomes a liability at that point. Because now not only are they just having a bad day, or they're not feeling good mentally, physically, whatever, now it's putting everyone else at risk, officers, fire, the caller, what have you. Like, it's a whole other ball game at that point. So it's like, take the time.
Yeah.
But it does have that stigma still.
It does, for sure. I think we're slowly moving away from it, but it's still hanging in there a bit, definitely. So let's talk a little bit more about first responder wellness. You found it during your journey, and now you're team first responder wellness, which I think is awesome. Can you tell me a little bit more about the company and what you do over there?
Yeah, so what I do is I work on our outreach team. I'm a public safety advocate, and what that looks like is I go out and either speak to organizations, but mainly speak to agencies and talk to their peer support teams or their associations and tell them about our company. I also go to conferences and set up booths there. I basically am drawing people in to make sure that I can tell as many people about us as possible. That's what I would say. And I got so passionate about that simply because of my journey, because I didn't know about us. So I want to make sure that first responders know that there are resources out there. And so my day is different every day. Some days I'm calling people. Some days I'm doing tours of our facility, having people come out and see firsthand what our facility looks like, meeting our team, seeing the houses that our first responders live in, and also we're doing Zoom meetings talking about our program. Sometimes we're at agencies doing presentations. And then some weeks I'm at conferences. So, really every day is so different, and I absolutely love that. So a little bit about our program. We're an inpatient and outpatient program. So what we like to say is we're a two-phase program. And what is so special about that, and the reason why this is so important, is we can have people come in for mental health or for substance abuse, alcohol, anything really. So if they come in, what's so important is I call it a bubble. They come into the detox house and they have 24-hour nursing care. And when we say a house, we mean an actual house in a neighborhood. And it's a nice neighborhood in Huntington Beach in Orange County. And they're not wearing gowns or slippers, shuffling around or anything. They're just normal houses with first responders only. So this is exclusively a first responder program. And I call it cross-pollination. Like, there's police, fire, dispatchers, border patrol, DEA. Like, we have like a little bit of everyone, like of the first responder community, corrections, to like everybody. So they come in and they stay in their house. And during that, as we call it, first responders like to be given a task list or training. Like, they're really completing their programming there in the house, and their groups and everything. So they're staying there, and they have their nursing staff there. The next phase 2, is more of an outpatient programming with a living component. So it's more like dorm life or college life, where we're starting to ease them back into regular life. And so what I love about that is that anyone can do great in phase 1 in a bubble. Any first responder, especially, you give them a task list or training list and they're going to do great, because we all are really great at being type A and doing functioning with a list.
Yes.
And so our program's 60 to 90 days, and that sounds like a lot. And especially with first responders, by the time that they're asking for help, it's probably 5 years later than they should have asked for help, because they don't want to admit that they need help. They've already burned through all their time and burned through money. So it's usually really hard to get them to commit to that. But the point is that 60 to 90 day structure is so that they can get into long-term outcomes of success. They go through phase 1 where they're in the bubble, and then we're easing them back into regular life. And I've been around for a few years watching this, and the outcome has been amazing for these people who have done this. And when they get in for the first, they're usually hesitant sometimes when they commit to that first 30 days. But then once they get in and they start seeing the program and they see the other first responders that have been there, they're like, okay, I'm going to stay. I see that often. I would have people come to the fellowship group they're hesitant, and then they go, hey, Cassie, I am going to stay. I'm like, I know. That's how it works. Because they see other people, their peers, and then they let their walls down. And I think that's what's so special about a first responder program, right? Is that if you go to like another, like my Gen Pop program, go to a Gen Pop program and you're seeing a housewife, or you're seeing someone that you might book in jail or whatnot, you're going and they're talking about how they hate cops, or like, you don't feel safe. You're not going to share about your work trauma. You're going to put those walls back up. You come to a first responder program like ours, and you're a first responder, you see someone that's been there 3 weeks or 3 months or whatnot, and they start sharing something that you've been thinking about that you haven't shared with anyone else. And suddenly your walls start to come down because you feel safe. And so we find that they start to open up a lot quicker. So it's pretty incredible. On the second phase, they're able to go to dinner with their family if they're local. They're able to walk to the beach. They're able to ride bikes. They're able to have that. They can go home for the weekend, like if they live up north where you're at, or they're out of state. We have about 60% who are here local in California and 40% who are out of state. I would say like Pacific Northwest, we get a lot of, like Arizona, Nevada, that type of thing, Idaho. So that's like the major component. We also have a big involvement with the family program. We don't believe in just healing the first responder. We also want to make sure we're involving the family. So from day 1, the first week, we involve the family. There's a weekly Zoom that the family gets involved in where they get to bond with each other, because at week 5 or 6, we have a 3-day family program that the family gets involved in. And they come in, whether they're from out of state or not, and we put them up in a hotel nearby. And they do a 3-day programming where they do support groups with everyone involved, all the first responders and them, so that they also realize that they're not alone. Because if you raise the first responder up and then send them back to the environment that they just came from, then it's not going to be successful. We need to heal the whole component.
No, 1,000%. Yeah. I think you guys are doing like awesome stuff, because, and of course, I wouldn't have thought about this before being in this line of work. It's just how much people don't get, like, the stories and the things that we're exposed to, and the things that, especially folks who are like in the field, touching it, smelling it, and then you have dispatchers who are hearing it, seeing it, like just all these different ways of taking in trauma, multiple traumas throughout a shift. And like you said, like going to, a Gen Pop, as you described it, situation, it's like, I have to spend X amount of time getting you to get there with me, like to understand what our baseline is. And our baseline is already so high that now I'm working, instead of working on my trauma and the things that I'm here trying to work through, I'm trying to get you to just be at my baseline, and my baseline is so high. So walking into the room with people who are already there, who get it, you don't have to tell me about it, I'm sure is freeing for folks
Well,
who are
and
looking to get through this process.
the other component is the cultural competency, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
our not only are the clients our people, but our staff are our people too. So not like
Mm-hmm.
I'm of course retired, but also from the bottom up, like our behavioral health techs are all anyone in our company is either retired first responders, former first responders, or
Mm-hmm.
family of first responders. And that includes our clinical team because we want to make sure that they know that they're not going to be coming in and being asked, well, why are you still doing this work? I've had that happen. I know countless of first responders who have been told by their therapist, well, your job's too stressful, so go find something else to do. I mean, I've had clinicians tell me that. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Cassie, like your job's stressing you out, so probably go find something else or stop working nights. That's your main problem. And I'm like, that's not an option.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, back when I was going through my stuff, like I point blank told my doctors, like, I love working night shifts. I've been doing it for 13 years. I'm not going to stop. So you better
Yeah.
find a way to make it so I can do it. Fix the
Yeah.
brain, do something else. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know, but I'm still doing it. And I did. Like, they
Yeah.
made it work for me. So we don't want to have therapists that are, that's the other component, right? Like therapists that are scared of our trauma or we traumatize our therapists. I've heard that so many times too. So
Yeah.
our therapists are people who get it. And so that's such a big part.
Mm-hmm.
We want to make sure that cultural competency is there. It's huge. It has to be. And the other part of our business, so treatment is our main part. First responder wellness is treatment. We have a sister company called Shift Wellness. They cover the education and retreats part. And so we have a retreat. This is a big part I wanted to share too. We have a spouses retreat.
Mm.
And it's for female spouses, and also female first responders are allowed to attend as well. And we just got a property in Idlewild, which is just, I think it's north of Palm Springs, about 40 minutes. And so we used to host it in Temecula, but we just switched. So we have this retreat and it's been very successful. I've known many females who have gone through it, and it's more about empowerment for the spouse, not about how to take care of your spouse who's in first responder land, but how to empower yourself and get focused back on self-care and how to take care of yourself and that balance. And it's been so amazing to hear these stories of these women who have gone through this, because if you think about it, like, not only is our job so hard, right? Dispatching, and then on top of that, all the other parts, the components of first responders, but like people who have to live with us,
Yeah.
it's really hard too, because our
Yeah.
schedules are hard, but also then the
Mm-hmm.
traumas that we go through and then how that affects us is hard. And then having to deal with us as a family, that part is hard too. And
Yeah.
so having that as a resource has been great. But we do trainings, and then we also merged with the Counseling Team International. And so we have a lot of moving resources that have been such an amazing part of our company that a lot of people don't know about. There's so many
Mm-hmm.
resources now. And
Yeah.
the fellowship groups is my baby. That's been I just throw that flyer everywhere. But like, I do the Thursday night Zooms. I
Okay,
just
perfect. This is the next thing I was going to ask about with the
The
Zoom
fellowship
meetings,
groups.
and
Yep.
yeah, and how folks can jump on these Zoom meetings, and where they can access them, because I know we're living in a really strange world still, and a lot of people are looking, especially for virtual connections. A, because our schedules are weird, and B, because when we're starting to be vulnerable, we still kind of want to have exit routes, and I think virtual meetings provide safe spaces, but also the ability to exit when we're feeling overwhelmed and we're not ready to push past certain points.
Yeah, for sure. So we started the Zooms after COVID started, right? Because we were doing only in person for the longest time. And then we started the Zooms, and that was such a hit because so many people from all over started coming, and then we're like, well, we're keeping them. And so now we still do both. Like, people started going back in person, and we kept the Zooms. So we have one Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday nights. The Wednesday night one is female only. And then, I mean, people can get in touch with me, and I'll send anyone the links for them wherever they want. We just basically, we call it the speakeasy, because our flyers have just names and phone numbers and locations, as far as like general areas, and then you have to contact the individual for their link.
Okay.
And so that way we vet them to make sure they're a first responder, so to speak. And we don't make you like send us an ID or anything, but we just make you tell us, hey, I'm fire or police, and kind of just to give us a little general idea of who you are, just so that we can keep our group safe. And I mean, this has been one of my favorite connections. Like, here in SoCal, we have like a coffee meetup once a month too. And so it's been a healthy space for me for so long, because I didn't have that before. Like, I loved group therapy when I found it. And at first I was one of those people that's like, talk therapy worked for me, but group therapy, I'm like, what is that? And I don't know about that. And then once I figured it out, I'm like, okay, this is really great for me. And then I'm like, there are first responder groups? And I'm like, and then I was skeptical, because I'm like, you mean to tell me that cops go to a group and talk? Because I was like, there's no way, right?
Right.
Like, I just don't see that happening.
They can barely clearly talk over the radio, and we're expecting them to be.
I'm like, there's no way. And I've been at debriefings. Like, I was on our peer support team. I'm still on our regional team. I'm like, there's no way that you're telling me a group of cops gets together in a room and talk together. And so when I went the first time, I was really like hesitant. And then there was a lot of fire people there, so that helped balance it. And then these people are my tribe, and I make sure to show gratitude as much as I possibly can, because they have been through so much shit for me, and I try to make sure I'm there for them. And our group is ever changing and growing, but there's a core group of us that have been there the last 3 years together through it all, and continue, and I'm just really fucking grateful for them. So
it's so amazing. And like, one thing that you mentioned and kind of said was, when you're going through your journey and still going through your journey, is that you tried all of these different things. And I think for people, in the regular life who are thinking about therapy, and as well as first responders, is what you might have to try on a few different therapists. You might have to try on a few different methods and ways. Like, it's you got to work to find what works for you. And I think people knowing that it might take a few tries to find the right fit. And that's why you guys have so many different types of programs and resources, because not everything works for everybody. So really finding, if group works for you, if one-on-one works for you, if going to the retreats, if connecting with spouses, Zoom calls, like all these different ways to seek help and community and understanding is part of the process as well. So if you're someone who's like thinking about, like, I tried it once, it didn't work, I went to that one therapist, it was terrible, it might take a few different folks finding the first responder wellness group, like it might take a few swings. And I think that's super important to acknowledge that part of the process as well, when seeking therapy and seeking counseling and things of that nature.
That's some amazing advice, and so true. And something that I've always said is, first responders, you have a very, very, very small window when someone asks for help, because then the next day they might be totally fine and say that they're fine because they feel good for a brief moment. But I can't tell you how many times someone's been like, I tried it once and I didn't have a good experience, so I'm done. But I also see that people will be like, I don't think the treatment's right for me, so I'm going to go to a support group, or try a support group, or try therapy. And then they'll try it for a while, and then they'll be like, okay, yep, I'm ready for treatment. Or do something out of order, so to speak, and then try it for a while or whatnot. So even if you're just brave enough to try one, do it. Because it's worth it to me. And like the saying I always say, it works if you work it, which is the ending of an AA meeting, which
Mm-hmm.
to me is like my motto that I still like write down everywhere, because I have to put the effort in every day. Like if I don't, then that's when I start getting back into my shit. So if you put the effort in, it's going to work for you.
Definitely. So obviously, there's not one thing that I'm sure you have come across that um, helps you with self-care and things of that nature. But for someone who is just getting started in dispatch, like who is really trying to create a plan and game plan to help reduce and improve self-care, what is something that you have learned through your journey that you wish you would have known, from the start, something that folks listening can add to their tool belt, so to speak, to help them with self-care in this line of work?
So for me, as soon as you said that, you're like, if there was one thing for me, it's meditation for sure. And I will tell
Meditation,
you, I was always the person who said, I cannot meditate. I have 50,000 tabs open. Like I can't do it. And the reason I couldn't do it was because I did that. Like I started and I continued that habit of having 50,000 tabs open, and I never practiced. Meditation is a practice. So I had to start small and keep practicing. And now I do it daily, and it became a thing. And then when I went back to work after going through recovery, I had to do it every day. And when I didn't, I would get shitty. So like I would notice that I was answering the phone and I was like, ooh, that is grumpy. So I'm going to step away for a minute and then I'll be right back. And I would go into our little like sleep room for just, and I'm talking, and meditation can be a scary word for some people. And I know this, and I teach this in like every dispatcher class I teach. And then I'm doing it like at conferences now. And like, this is a big deal to me, guys. Like if I can teach in this, however long this podcast ends up being, 55 minutes or whatever, one thing you can take out of this is it. Meditation, 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 1 minute a day, 30 minutes. You don't have to be overzealous, but like 3 minutes. I would get to work, sit in my car. Insight Timer is an app and it's free. You can do a guided meditation. I have a 5-minute guided meditation I do with this female that's on there. I would pop it on my phone, do the 5-minute guided meditation on self-worth, and then I would start my day. Or you can just do their like little timer, set the timer for 5 minutes and do their little ocean sounds. Or you can just listen to music for 5 minutes. Like I also love like the piano, like cover songs, like where it's just like acoustic music kind of stuff, like where it's like not any words or something. Like I do that a lot too. And walk, like that's also a form of meditation. It doesn't have to look the same for everyone, is my point. You make meditation whatever you make it, but please do that, because it rests your mind and gives your body time to reset. And we see and hear so much trauma, more than normal people, and it causes our bodies to react differently, and our minds and our stress chemicals, and then it affects us long term. And meditation helps to change that back to the way it should be and change our bodies. So it will reduce those chemicals for us. And it's so, so important.
That's awesome. I mean, I know one thing that I tell folks too, even like breathing between calls, you know what I mean? Like just taking that moment to just release, inhale, exhale, even like, especially in the midst of getting slammed, it's super important. It resets you. Even those small, very small moments when you're really intentional with them. So I can only imagine making that space to do it for 3 minutes, 5 minutes, could even be more beneficial.
There's like so many grounding tools that like I have now that I do that too. And breathing is one of them. And so important.
Definitely. So how do people find you? How can they reach out? How can they see what you guys are all about over there at First Responder Wellness?
Yep. So, I mean, for me, I have a work cell phone number, so I'm totally fine with people reaching out on that. Phone number is 714-485-5685. 5328. And then our website is firstresponderwellness.com. There is a little dash in there somewhere, but I know you're going to post it, so I'm not worried.
Yeah, I got you. Don't worry about it.
And then my emails, it's cassie.sexton@firstresponderwellness.com.
Awesome. Perfect.
And then I'm also on Instagram and on LinkedIn, so all of those are accessible.
That is how I found you guys. Instagram.
Yeah.
You guys are putting out some awesome content. Like seriously, it's really good content. And I
look forward to seeing you at APCO.
Yes, I am looking forward to going out there. It'll be my first one. So I'm excited and nervous.
It's gonna be so big.
Cassie, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing all that information about first responder wellness, letting us take a look into your journey. I know it's going to help so many people who are like really considering, am I alone out there? Is it, being vulnerable in this line of work is hard. And I just really want to thank you for being willing to come up and share your story with everybody.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, and I really appreciate it. And I love sharing about my journey, but also connecting with dispatchers, obviously, and all first responders. But it's special for me to connect with other dispatchers and be able to share about all the tools that help me, but also about first responder wellness, which is so special.
Awesome. So thank you again so much, Cassie. I'm going to go ahead and kick you out of here respectfully, and I'll post all of her information, her contact information, her work phone, so you guys can hit her up directly and see what resources are available for you from First Responder Wellness. Thank you all for joining me today on another Let's Talk Dispatch. Cassie, thank you so much, First Responder Wellness, for being willing to come out and be vulnerable, share your story. I know you have and will continue to have help so many first responders, from dispatch to police to fire. The work you guys are doing out there is amazing. If you are looking to connect with First Responder Wellness, I'm going to include all their information in the description of this video, in the bio, in the link. I'll include it all so you can get directly in contact with Cassie and First Responder Wellness to see what they got and what works best for you on your journey. Again, thank you guys so much. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook. And until next time, stay raspy.